Hello and welcome to Teenagers Untangled, the audio hug for parents going through the teen years. I'm Rachel Richards, journalist, parenting coach, mother of 2 teenagers and 2 bonus daughters.
Hi there, I'm Susie Asley. I'm mindfulness coach, mindful therapist and musician and mother of 3 teenagers. 2 of them are twins.
Right, today we're going to talk about a concept that I've become aware of only recently, being a parent of the sandwich generation.
Oh yes.
We're not talking about food. Right, so what is it? Well, it's people who are stuck in the middle, still trying to juggle the needs of kids, whilst also dealing with ailing older parents at the same time, and probably for a lot of the women at this age group, dealing with the menopause or your midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it.
That's a shit sandwich.
It's a shit sandwich. It's a very simplistic description, but the more I researched it, the more I began to understand, I think what's happening in society and possibly what we could be doing better to help ourselves. But I think just understanding where we're sitting in society helps, doesn't it?
Super helpful.
Because I think sometimes you kind of think, I don't understand why it's so difficult.
And it's a big thing now. It really big. I can see it in lots of my friends.
And I don't really have a lot of answers, but I do have some advice.
Amazing. Loads of research. Well done, Rachel.
Well, let's start with a nugget.
Yes. So my nugget today is I had to have a rethink about something I thought.
Which is good, because we can all grow.
It's a good reminder. So my daughter is going to her prom in the summer, 16. And that, as we know, wasn't a thing for us. It's come over from the States. And I was a little bit like poo-poo, really? That sounds really fun. Of course you're going to go, but all the dresses, can't we just find something? And really, and all of the stuff around it. I poo-pooed it a little bit, to be honest, and thought, crikey, they're expensive. I'm definitely not buying one of them. And then I could just see the momentum of her mates and her. And long story short, I had a rethink, and I could just see this actually really mattered to her. It was really important. And, what was I doing to kind of make it, not give her this experience. And so we ended up going to a couple of shops we had a whole day down in Brighton and going to this amazing shop. And it was the most fun day I've had for ages. It was so lovely. That. And the beautiful part was just watching her play, dress up for the day. And she's always loved dresses. Even since she was little, she used to just put on all her dresses at once. And the joy in her face was amazing. And I'm sure that's not the experience for all girls, but for her, she loved it. And it just made me really think, my goodness, we would both have missed out on that if I had just gone, nah, this is rubbish, and carried on thinking my thoughts. So step back and having a rethink and listening to her was really important.
Oh, I love that.
It was really beautiful, yeah.
And a fun day out for everyone.
Really fun, and the joy in her eyes, I can remember it. It's beautiful.
And there are some charities around here that for people who don't have the money for that, which is amazing, where, also people donating beautiful shoes that can be worn, which I've done, which I think is a wonderful thing to do. Yeah,
people reselling and even, or the charities, they're brilliant.
My daughters have my wardrobe.
Brilliant, perfect. But with the idea was the whole dress up of it. Yeah, the whole dress up of it. Yeah, it doesn't.
And actually, you don't even have to wait for that. I've done those kind of. Open my wardrobe. We all tried clothes on, like dresses. Yeah. It's the most fun. So
much fun. Yeah,
get the high heels out. Everything. Yes, love it. My nugget is that Minnie Brightsparks responded to the episode saying her son has a paper round and also tutors, so he doesn't need an allowance. But unfortunately for me, where we live, it's really difficult finding work for the girls and being able to get them there because we live in the middle of nowhere. Because it kind of ties into what you've been saying. Her daughter's rather younger and she had given her daughter an allowance and her daughter went out and bought mascara and she wasn't comfortable about her daughter wearing mascara to school.
Right. And
she said she really felt like she'd overreacted, which is, I've overreacted to things in the past, things that really trigger me, and it's all my stuff. And I've used the PAR, how not to overreact. We used an acronym in that, which is PAR, which I found really helpful. But it's also this kind of having to get your head around the fact that we can give our kids our values. So you can have conversations with them about why you have an issue with something happening. So, for example, when my daughter tried to put on makeup when I thought she was too young for it, I said, the reason I feel uncomfortable is because what you're doing is you're signaling to the world that you're sexually available. To me, that's what this lipstick, it just feels uncomfortable. But talk to me about your own friendship groups. Talk to me. And the great thing was, it was a really bonding experience, because then she started explaining, well, my girlfriends do this and we're doing that. And once I could see it from her point of view, I thought, okay, so it's not the same. It's not the same as how it felt for me.
No.
It doesn't mean the same thing.
No.
And I need to understand that. And then we could both talk about this.
And can we find a space in the middle? Yeah.
And then she trusted me because she knew that I was listening to her and I was interested in her viewpoint.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? It's listening and being flexible with our opinions.
But also being prepared to talk about your values, and because your values really matter. And our kids do care what our values are.
They do, yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So you have another review?
I do, from Louise, which is lovely. It's fantastic. I've just come across your podcast, and can I just say how fantastic it is? I founded a charity for young people that uses coaching to support their well-being, and this is so in line to what we try and practice. We're also aware of the need to support parents, so I'll definitely be directing them to this podcast. Thank you again. And she's from Grit Charity,
which I interviewed.
So yes, amazing.
Yes, she's brilliant.
Thank you, Louise.
And I love what she's doing, and she loves what we're doing. So everyone loves everybody.
Mutual love. Thank you.
Yes. Right. So back to the sandwiches. Talking about life in terms of generalizations is obviously quite a curious approach, because, often they're going to be people who aren't the way that we say. So we'll just start there and say, I know that not everybody's going to be this or that. Right. So let's talk about the generation. So I got this from Pew Research, and Pew Research defines eras based on a consensus. Okay. So Gen Z is 1997 to 2012, which is pretty much our teenagers. Then, and interestingly, my younger bonus daughter. Okay. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996. So my other bonus daughter is a millennial.
Okay.
And actually, it is different because they grew up in a different, with a different relationship to social media. One was in social media. One wasn't growing up with it in the same way. Wasn't as big. Gen X, that's us. That's 1965 to 1980. It's a big sort of gap, isn't it? Big thing, big chunk. And Beresford Research actually cuts boomers into two segments. They have, the first is 1946 to 54, and the second is 55 to 64. Okay. So it's a big era. I'm pretty sure our parents are boomers. Yeah. Well, mine weren't. Mine were silent generation. Mine are both deceased. So they were 1928 to 1945. So I had older parents.
Yeah, and one of mine would be in that category and the other in
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but a lot of our listeners are going to have parents that are either silent generation or boomers. And it matters because the boomers have got a really bad reputation. Or a good reputation. It depends on how you look at it. Because, my parents came from this sort of spare the rod, spoil the child era. And actually it was the kind of around the 1950s that the attachment theory was developed. Yeah. And that sort of started to change people's viewpoints of how you're supposed to parent. And this is pertinent because then if you talk to a lot of parents like our generation, they'll say that what their parents did was basically open the door, say, off you go, and they'd come home at whatever time. That's not true of everybody, because there were people like you who were kind of shut in a room practicing their violin.
And lived away from everyone else. Yeah.
Yes, but so there are differences. But the boomer generation are kind of known for living longer than the previous generation, for living better.
Yes.
And there's actually something called boomeritis, which is it's a medical problem where they're all exercising too much still. And it means that they get inflammation in all sorts of areas that may not have done before. So the doctors have gone, she's got boomeritis, because they won't give up. They won't stop exercising, which is a good thing. We know that exercise is really good for you, but they're kind of carrying on beyond where they would have before. Yes. And what's really interesting is, of course, our generation started having children later.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was at university, I looked after all these foreign students one summer as a job. And this girl had come over from Poland. There was a whole Polish contingent who were brought over by the Catholic Church. And she was 19. And I said, so she was leaving the course. I said, what are you doing now? Because the boys were all going off to go and hang out in fun places and see London. And she said, I'm going back to get married. And I said,
Oh, wow,
that's really young. And she said, no, it's normal. It's normal for me, because in our society, you know, I would be a bit over the hill if I left it too long.
Yeah.
So, you know, whereas I got married, 2005, and I didn't have my first child till I was 38, my second when I was 39, because I'm really crazy like that. And I had bonus daughter teenagers quite soon after that.
And that age is completely normal now.
Yes. And that's the thing, because I thought when I went to sort of toddler groups, I was going to be surrounded by young women. No,
it's increasing. I don't know if it's going back the other way now, but you know, that would not be abnormal now.
No. So what's happened is we've got the boomer generation who've stayed alive longer, who are living their best lives, who actually accumulated a lot of wealth. And we'll go into that in a minute. And then also there's us having children later. So the grandparents of our children are that much older. So they're less, you know, they are staying alive and being healthy longer, but they're less capable of, you know, if you had a younger grandparent, they'd be much more in on it.
Quite a lot of resentment building for that generation, isn't there? Because they've got, you know, their houses were cheaper and all of those different things through no fault of their own.
No, because we live in our eras. Yeah. And then there's people like me who, you know, you end up going through slap into your menopause or perimenopause right when your kids are becoming teenagers, which is great fun, as we all know. And then the kids are taking longer to grow up. We know this. Yes. We've done the stats on it. Yeah. And we also got multi-generational households on a big upswing in America, and boomerang kids in the UK, where they go out, they try and start their lives. It's too expensive to come back home. Yeah.
So us who get to the kids are leaving home, hooray, we've got some space. We don't.
You have not got the space.
We've got on either side.
You know, and it's expensive because also parents now, a lot more parents are double income households. They can't afford to just have one parent at home. So a lot of parents are out, two parents working as well. Yeah. It's hard.
It's a big old sandwich.
It's a big sandwich.
Yeah.
And so
too much bread. I don't like too much bread in a sandwich. So... Go have an open sandwich.
And this, I started zoning in on this when I saw a tweet, which I'm going to read out. It's by a woman called Melissa's Mammalian Vibe Reflex.
Ooh, amazing name.
She said, our Pilates teacher was making small talk after class and asked if anyone had plans for Easter. A boomer-aged grandmother complained that ever since her parents passed away, her family stopped gathering for the holidays. She said, I miss those traditions, and then sighed. And this person tweeting said, it's as if she doesn't realise that she's the grandmother now. I see this all the time, and it's not just boomers, people not wearing the mantle of their season of life and being apparently unhappy with the consequences.
Yeah, because you have the choices, don't you? But, you know.
Yeah, and she said, I'm sure there's lots of reasons why this happens.
Yeah.
But what's confounding me is why are people engaging in these behaviours that are making them unhappy and they're not
doing anything about them?
Yes.
Being a victim.
Yes. And so coming back to this whole thing, so I think what's happened, because I keep talking about community, I've started really zoning in on community and thinking, we don't have the community. Where's the community? Where have they gone? And then I think back to when I was growing up, there was a man called Norman Tebbit, who was an MP, who basically said to people, on your bike, which was, if you haven't got a job where you are, get on your bike and go and find a job. And everyone went, oh, okay, I guess that's what it's about. And we became a lot more mobile searching for jobs. But of course, the downside is that you then lose your communities.
Yes. And we leave our parents who then get old and we need looking after, and then it's all a bit complicated.
Yeah, and they're not living near us. So my mother was living 100 miles away from me. So actually going up to spend time with her when I had small children was very, very difficult.
Yes. Really challenging.
Very challenging. And it's more than that, because the boomer generation are known for being much more independent than the previous elderly generation.
100%.
And they're outspending other generations on travel and dining out. Yeah. And they're living in their lovely houses.
Yes, having a great time.
They've accumulated their wealth around.
Yeah.
And the truth is, there have been, every now and then you get a flare up of people saying, why don't these people trade down? They've got these massive houses they're living in, and we've got a housing crisis. And the boomers are saying, well, why should I? Because you don't have the housing stock. And why should I go and live in a single room in some kind of housing thing for old people when I don't feel old?
And I don't want to,
Yes. So it's difficult.
Very difficult. And then we get stuck in that Cartman triangle, don't we, of victim, persecutor, rescuer, because we don't communicate around it properly.
Yes. And the millennial parents I've often seen people saying, where's my village? Daniel Cox, the director of the non-profit Survey Center on American Life, which researches changes and developments in American culture, said, in the old days, new parents would rely on relatives to provide support and knowledge.
Yeah.
The good old days that we all talk about, right? Because let's be honest, it wasn't always like that, was it? No.
And there were lots of bad bits.
I think we can say this, but let's just let's presuppose that was sort of what was going on, which to an extent in some cultures it really is. The mum will move in with the daughter and look after her when her children come along. And he said they're now turning to Google and apps. And there's an entire industry that's grown, $1 billion industry that's developed, providing knowledge and equipping parents with information on their best practices. Yeah. So then the boomers are going, well, I've done this already. And A, I want to go and have some fun, but B, you don't actually want to listen to me.
No, and I think that we have to take responsibility for that. We complain a lot about it wherever they're gone, but we also are not very good at taking help. Yeah,
we're not very good at taking help, and we're looking at the way they did it and going, well, I didn't like that.
Yes, I want to do it my way.
I'll do it my way.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways.
No.
And also the changes in society have been so dramatic that for a lot of them, they're spinning. The gender, race, politics has changed. It's like a whiplash, how much it's changed over a short period of time. And the whole gentle parenting movement.
Yeah, it leaves a lot of the older generation going, what are you doing?
Yes. And I don't know, I'm not going to do that with my grandchildren.
No,
and then the parents say, well,
then I'm not going to leave my kid with you.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Because they're scared the grandparent will traumatise them or something.
Yeah, you can mix it all up, but that's a story for another day. Yeah.
And the grandparents, just to put the shoe on the other foot, grandparents are saying, well, hang on a second. Here you are moaning about this, but actually you've overscheduled your kids' lives.
Yeah.
So, right, I've got time to see my kids, but where are they? Oh, they're at football matches. They're at what? I don't have a look in.
Yeah, what's happened to the weekend? Yeah.
Guilty. I've done that.
Yeah.
Because there used to be a Sunday lunch. The UK, British, known as a roast beef, we'd have a roast beef Sunday lunch and you gather the people around the table. And that's not really...
We try and do that, to be fair, but it's not every week. But it's different. It is very different.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, where is our community? And are we being realistic about what's possible given the era we're in? And how do we manage our parents? Because we're now at the point where they are getting frail and we have to look after them somehow.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing topic. It's a really good topic. And I've just flippantly commented on that Cartman triangle. But the more we're talking now, I'm thinking how relevant that actually is. And I think we've talked about it before on this podcast, but it's the idea of, it's communication. It sounds like communication because we all have these great ideas and ways that we think things should work. And probably because it's family and because it's really tricky stuff, that's our worst communication space.
Yeah.
And the Cartman triangle is this idea that when we don't communicate properly, we often get ourselves into three roles or we ping around in three roles. One of them is victim, one of them is persecutor, and one of them is rescuer.
Interesting.
And we tend to have a tendency to be one, but we ping around in all of them. And it's when we don't communicate that we get into them. So the classic example is old lady at a bus stop. She's waiting for her bus. Boy Scout goes, oh, there's a lady over there. I need to help her across the road. So he wants to be the rescuer. He goes over and she's like, oh, that's really sweet of him. I'll go across the road with him. And as they're crossing the road, her bus comes and she's like, oh, my bus is coming. And she gets really stressed, whacks him over the head with her stick. He turns into victim. She's now persecutor. And so it goes and so it goes. And because nobody communicated properly in the first place. And that's a silly example, but we do that all the time. And the way out of it is to communicate your needs properly. But I think we get into it. So just from what you've talked about just now, the boomer generation, 1 minute they're persecutors, 1 minute they're victims, 1 minute they're rescuers, because we're not communicating, we're not really being honest with what do we actually need, what are we willing to do. I think that's a big part of it. Am I willing to take care of my parents? Yes, no, and on all guilt or expectations. It's really layered, really complicated. But so we first need to sit down and have a really good think about where are my boundaries? What do I need? What am I willing to step up and do? What am I not willing to step up and do? And then communicate it neutrally without falling into these really kind of unhelpful, sometimes toxic communication patterns.
Because we're going to be in this situation where, we already lack a lot of community that would help.
Yeah.
And I've been talking about how the onus is really on us to start rebuilding these communities. We need to find ways to get our kids away from their screens, doing things together. We need to do more to support each other rather than judging each other. So we need to be kinder to ourselves and then be kinder to other parents and look out for them.
Yeah.
And I think we also need to be having conversations with the older generation about what we would like. And one of the things I've started doing is a Christmas get together for the entire extended family. So it's not just our Christmas, it's actually the whole family, even the ones who don't like each other and argue. You put them all in because we have enough space.
Especially the ones who don't like each other.
Yes, and actually they have said, oh gosh, this is great because there's such a big number of them that they don't normally congregate and maybe do that in summer just because I can do that. So that's something I can give. And we need to start looking like, what can I do? And I used to do Easter egg hunts. Stop now because my kids they're a bit older. But then I started doing a fireworks thing where we have fireworks around the corner that are free. It's just a charity, so I put money in the buckets. And everyone comes to mine and we walk across the fields together and it's kind of a free-for-all. And I think just trying to look at ways in which we can integrate people in the community, but then also the older people and say, so what would you like to do with the family more? And also, how are we going to figure this next step out? Because that's coming at us like a freight train.
And it takes courage to have those conversations. I can feel that in my system. I'm like, oh golly, I need to have these conversations too. It's coming down the road, and then all the things that potentially we're not very good at communicating in the family, which is our most problematic communication space because it can be so triggering. They come out to play, it's like a can of worms gets opened, maybe there's sibling problems, maybe there's, generational things, maybe there's stuff that happened when you were 10 that comes out that you don't really want to talk about. I'm exaggerating a bit, but still, there's a tone in a family, isn't there? And we push it away and we don't want to talk about it. So stopping and going, what am I willing to do in this? Where can I see my role in maybe 5-10 years? And what am I willing to do? And what am I not willing to do?
Yeah. And
then having those conversations.
Yeah. And the problem is that, okay, let's say you're not an only child, your parents are going to need support at some point. You don't know what that support is going to look like. So there's a really good book that I've recommended before, and it's to do with dying. Actually, it's called Being Mortal, which I loved because it's got a checklist in it. And whilst I'm not trying to dwell on death, it's one of those ones where it's just having conversations about what they might see as a good life as the rest of their life. Because a lot of them are decamping to other places going, I've done my bit, I've done my child raising, don't want to look after your my grandchildren, or, I'll send you a present. Like, well, no, I want some help. But maybe you don't. So having those open conversations, but also having conversations with your siblings about how is this going to be managed? And who's going to, if they're living a long way away, how's that support going to happen? Because gone are the days. So the boomer generation are reaping the rewards of working their life, paying their pension. Gone are the days where a government's going to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to do it because people are getting older, living longer. So they've got more complex needs, which means the healthcare systems can't cope. And actually, that's one of the biggest problems is that the healthcare system simply can't cope with the complex needs. And we are now looking at a triangle where right at the bottom, the tiny, tiny point is the kids coming through who aren't going to be able to provide for us. So we also lucky us, need to think about that too. So it's really tough. So I think the only thing that we can be doing is thinking clearly and honestly about this, trying to think clearly and honestly, trying to reach out and find support, trying to have conversations in the community. I bumped into a woman on when I go for dog walks now, I talk to everybody. Absolutely. I just talk to, my husband's like, you talk to everyone. I'm like, yeah, I do.
Avoid the fields around Rachel. She's the crazy lady.
But I'm learning so much. It's so interesting. And I bumped into a woman I met years ago, and she's got a young daughter. And she said, it's really hard. And I said, what's hard? And she said, like, I've tried to join groups, like I tried to join the knitting club, and then they're really closed off, and they sort of don't. And then there was a book group, and my friend joined it, and then they shut down the WhatsApp group and then started a new WhatsApp group without her in it. And you
How
just
old
think
is she?
she's younger than me, so her kids are younger.
Okay.
And my point is, it's almost like we've got a narrative in social media where people are on social media with lots of connections and then no connections in their real life.
Yeah.
And we somehow have to start looking around and going, how do I make this happen around me? Let me talk to as many people as possible. And you know what's amazing when you do that? You realise how nice most people are.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Oh, yes. And it's such a relief, because you go online and there's so much, and it's not fair, and so much victim everything and people bashing. And then you just chat to people locally.
Yeah. They're lovely. Most people are lovely.
They're lovely.
Yeah.
And sort of,
if you go into the conversation expecting them to be lovely, they are. If you go into the conversation expecting them to be idiots, then they always also are that.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah. But I guess that's what I'm getting at. I guess I'm thinking that we can't be asleep at the wheel.
No.
We need to, rather than hoping someone else is going to come and rescue us, because there's nobody.
We have to be responsible for it. Yeah. And you said something sort of just earlier about I don't want to talk about death, and I don't want to go into that either, but I do think that's an important part of it, is that we are so terrified of talking about death, talking about people getting older, because we don't want to dwell on it, we don't want to think about it, that we are in complete denial about these things happening. Yeah. And that is a big part of it, I think.
Yes. And I'm also conscious, because I've had cancer, I've got friends who've died as well. I'm also conscious that, is this it? Like, if I could die tomorrow, I want to make sure I've made the most of it.
100%.
So we have to live with this understanding. And this is getting a bit depressing, isn't it? But
well, it's a balance between being realistic, isn't it? Being realistic that stuff is going to happen in the future, and living in the present moment. Yeah. So kind of dipping into the future, it's kind of being clearer on it, deciding how do we want to be in the future, and then being in the present for the most of the time. Yeah. So we're not panicking and being anxious about it, but we're living in the present moment. We're making the most of what we have right now, because that's all we have really any influence over, and just being a bit clearer on how it's going to look in the future.
And living the seasons of our lives, as this lady said on Twitter. Yes. I love that, because I think there's so much anti-aging advice, and I saw this really painful thing where this mother-in-law had said, she had all these family photos of her mother-in-law, and she said, can you take, I don't want any of those. Oh. And she said, I don't like how I look.
Oh no.
Because I can see all the wrinkles. Oh. And I just thought, gosh,
that's because so we should do an episode on that, actually.
Yeah, because I think we need to enjoy and accept the part, and actually, as the parents who are going into the teenage years, yes, it's tough, but also think, let's be the people. Let's be the people who say, I know I'm sandwiched. I know this is tough, but let's reach out to all the other sandwich people and say, this is tough. Let's do things together.
I love that. Come and walk in Rachel's fields.
Yeah. I know.
She'll scoop you up.
Actually, a while back, I ended up talking to a chap. He just said, he just said something to me. And I said, oh, yeah, I started chatting to him. And then I realised he wanted me to go to church on Sunday.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
And he'd seen me as a part of his ministry. And I just said, thank you. That's really,
I
really
want
kind.
to do the knitting club, you said?
I know. But even that, I have a really big thing. I think we need a space in our lives where we can stop and think together. Yeah. So it's good to stop and think on your own, but it's also, and I've called it with my daughter when we go at the weekends, when we go for a dog walk, and we call it church. I called it church. And it's where we she starts her confessions and we have these conversations about the meaning of life and reflecting on how things have been. So wherever that happens, I think we need to reintegrate, because we don't have our churches around us. I mean, some people do. Obviously, some of you will be religious. You will be whatever religion you have.
And for some people, that man inviting them
would be very welcome.
Would be very welcome.
Yes. But I just think that if you aren't visiting a community something, then you're creating some space in your life where you can do that.
Yeah, reflecting with others is a really beautiful way of putting it, actually. I love that.
Which is kind of what we do here.
Yeah. It's a bit more waffly, I'd say, but
yeah, and it's just us.
Yeah. Yeah, so
but they can actually switch us off.
They can, and they probably have. If you're still listening,
no one's listening.
Well
They've gone. Okay. Anyway, I think we've covered that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh my gosh! And I forgot to mention, there is a Facebook group, you won't believe this, called "Okay, Boomer, it's time to get in your forever box."
What? What does that even mean?
It means we've had enough of you, move on.
Oh, gosh.
Which is horrific. And there are 21,500 members. So if you're one of those members and you're listening, I don't like it.
No.
I think that's a horrible thing. It's private. I couldn't get in. I don't want to join it. No. But I just thought that's really miserable.
What, are they just bitching about the boomers?
Yeah. So let's not bitch about the boomer generation.
No.
Let's actually try and get some of their cash. Like, just say, can you take us on holiday with you?
Yeah.
We know you're living your best life, but can
Can we come? But it's true, isn't it? Like, every generation has, we're born into the generation we're born into. It's not a judgment thing.
It's a thing. And just recognizing it helps. Like, when you go, why is it so hard? This is why it's so hard.
Yeah. And it's true. Yeah.
It's true. Right. So we've sorted that.
Yeah. What kind of sandwich should we make now? I mean, what's your favourite sandwich? Let's end on that.
I don't really like sandwiches.
Oh, what?
Can I say that? I don't.
You don't like sandwiches?
I never,
What's wrong with you?
I don't like all the bread because mostly it's shot. Like, if I made it myself, that would be of interest. Okay. I'm much more of a poke bowl.
Oh, yes, poke bowl.
Yeah, I'm a poke bowl girl.
They are good, rice and veg and
all
stuff
the lots and lots of. I like lots of textures and lots of colours and lots of flavours. What about you?
Yeah, you can't put that in bread, can you?
No, you can't.
It would fall out.
You can't, which is why. And no. I'll just make another point while we're on this, that it is very modern to walk around eating.
Very modern.
And it never was the case. It always used to be frowned upon. And I quite like the have to sit down with my chopsticks, knife, fork, something, and actually eat, rather than walking around, just down the street, on the train, wherever. Yeah. I quite like that.
So you don't walk in the fields with your pokeball, for example?
I don't.
Do you think we're kind of going on a bit now?
We are. I think let's finish.
Shall we end?
All right. So that's it. If you liked that, which you probably didn't, but if you did, share it with somebody or send us a review. Please don't complain about how much we waffle. We promise we'll be better next time.
Oh, no, quite like
and you can find us on www.teenagersuntangled.com. Email on teenagersuntangled@gmail.com. I haven't mentioned that a couple of times. Where can we find you, Susie?
You can find me at www.amindfullife.co.uk, and I'm still thinking about what my favourite sandwich is. Which I think might be cheese and salad. And
what kind of cheese?
Well, something really tasty like cheddar or Marmite. I'm a big fan of Marmite.
Cheese and Marmite.
Or could be cheese and Marmite. Yeah. Anyway, enough of that.
Cheese and banana.
No, that sounds awful.
Cheddar. Have you never tried it?
No.
You're missing out, girl.
Peanut butter and banana.
No. Try it. Anyway, that's it for now. Goodbye.
Bye for now.